So although the holiday season is fast approaching and we've probably had most of the final hurrahs as far as video game news directly from companies themselves is concerned, that doesn't mean that things aren't necessarily going to happen. At least I hope they happen, or else what am I going to talk about on this channel? I guess I could do another charity scam event, but I mean, I've already done that already. How's the support on that? If you didn't watch yesterday's video, make sure you go watch it after this one. But I still think there will be some things happening, and they might just come from more unconventional places, such as the story we have today, because we actually have quite a large update on the future of the Legend of Zelda franchise and kind of the direction it's going, and maybe even a new playable character that is being discussed. So I want to talk about all this stuff with you guys because I find it interesting, and hopefully you do too. So if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like or dislike the video, I don't really care, but let's just hop straight into this. Of course, the last Legend of Zelda game we had was The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and upon its initial release, everyone seemed to absolutely love this game, but I definitely feel like some people have kind of turned a bit against it as time has gone on. Me personally, I still think it's a fantastic game, but I definitely kind of miss some of the elements of older Legend of Zelda games. But I did think that it did build upon the groundwork that Breath of the Wild created and really made its own sort of innovations within that game. But if you didn't like or love Breath of the Wild to begin with, I don't think Tears of the Kingdom really did anything to sort of sway people's opinions on that. And I think because of that, some people may have realized that they didn't really care for Breath of the Wild quite as much because of the wow factor of that game. You gotta remember, Zelda games had been pretty streamlined up until The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which the first time you play through that game, it's a completely brand new experience. Tears of the Kingdom is more of that experience with more polish and more things to do, but it's still kind of the base core experience. So if you weren't in love with that game, I can kind of understand why that game, you know, Tears of the Kingdom didn't quite have the lasting appeal of something like Breath of the Wild. So is it time for Zelda to kind of go in a different direction? Maybe even talk about new characters being involved as playable characters? Well, the first thing we're going to take a look at here is an interview from Mr. Anuma. I'm assuming this is being done because he was in town for the Game Awards. Of course, he did receive, or The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom did receive an award at this event. He was basically asked if Zelda was ever going to be a playable character, to which Mr. Anuma said, yeah, it's an interesting thing when you think about the name of the series, The Legend of Zelda, but Link is always the main character. And Link has been the main character and Zelda has always been involved, and they have a relationship and their own rules in each of the games. But it is true that I think there's always room for thinking about this type of thing and Zelda's role, and there may be some possibility for something like that to happen in the future. Now, the only time we really had Zelda as a playable character was, of course, in the CDI game, which nobody talks about because it's terrible, and Hyrule Warriors, because you could play as Zelda in Hyrule Warriors, and I thought it was pretty fun. I think maybe not a full game where Zelda is the main character, like not flip-flop and rolls with Zelda and Link or anything like that, but I think if you sprinkle in Zelda playable segments in a game, I think that could actually be really interesting. It could be like the yin to the yang, like in Spider-Man games. I know a lot of people don't like the Mary Jane segments, but it could be something like that where you see something from a different perspective of a different character, that character being Zelda. I'm not saying it has to be a stealth sort of slower paced thing, but I think that there is room for Zelda segments to be in a game, and maybe Zelda could have her own full adventure game. I mean, there is a lot of things you could do with that, so I think that's an interesting possibility. But I think people are more so wondering about the core Zelda experience. You know, The Legend of Zelda has been around for a very long time now, over 30 years. I'm getting old, but the core experience definitely took a major shift in terms of just what these games were about and how these games are now, with the fact that, you know, they have this more sort of open world aesthetic to them, kind of go anywhere, do anything at your own pace. And this was actually asked about if this was going to be, I guess, somewhat of a trilogy of games with Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and then a third follow-up game. Well, this was in an interview with Game Informer. Anuma's making the rounds here. And the same notion where you did earlier this year confirmed that there won't be any DLC for Tears of the Kingdom because you've already accomplished everything you want to accomplish with this game. Have you ruled out another direct sequel? Enuma laughs. I guess that's how he would laugh. Well, that would be a sequel to a sequel, which is getting a bit wild when you think about it. But as I've mentioned previously with Tears of the Kingdom, we were seeking to build on top of the world we created with Breath of the Wild and really exhaust the possibilities of what we could put into that world. I think it is, to use a bit of a term, an hypothesis, or the final form of the version of that version of Legend of Zelda. In that regard, I don't think that we'll be making a direct sequel to a world such as that we've created. Now, some people are reading this in very interesting ways. Some people are saying, oh, well, this isn't saying that, you know, the next Zelda game isn't going to be an open world game. It's just talking about for, like, you know, that there might be like a sequel or something involved in that, or a spin-off or a remaster or a remake. Because when I think of the Legend of Zelda games on the Nintendo Switch, Breath of the Wild was first, but Link's Awakening was second, and he's talking about sequels to sequels. So I don't even think like Link's Awakening is being factored into this whole situation. To me, this honestly sounds like, hey, we wanted to create a big open world, so we created the big open world, and then we decided we wanted to improve upon that big open world, and we did, but there's not really much else that I feel like we can add to it to make it, you know, its own sort of game. So maybe we're going back to the drawing board with this, because, you know, people definitely missed the dungeons and stuff like that. And, you know, Tears of the Kingdom, they had some more dungeon-esque areas. I definitely thought that they felt more like dungeons instead of just the shrines that you had in the game, but it still was not like a traditional dungeon. It still wasn't quite as long. You know, a lot of the dungeon portion of it was the journey to get to the dungeon to kind of, you know, pad it a little bit more, but it wasn't that classic Zelda formula. And when it comes to that classic Legend of Zelda formula, as far as a new game is concerned, since what, the 3DS now? Like, it's been a very long time. A Link Between Two Worlds was the last new traditional Legend of Zelda game, and maybe Nintendo has a hankering to go back to something like that. And that's not to say, you know, people are quick to say, well, you know, I don't think they're going to throw away that Breath of the Wild engine or that open space world that they created. I'm not necessarily saying they have to. I'm just saying that they could potentially hone that in or something, or just make it different. I mean, the layout of the map for Tears of the Kingdom is pretty similar to what we had with Breath of the Wild. Sure, there were some differences, but it was also pretty similar in the structure of it or anything. You could take elements from that and incorporate it into a more traditional style game. There's lots of things that you can do with that engine. Like, I feel like people just get hung up on the open world aspect and feel like that is the only thing that this engine involves, when in actuality it involves things like weapon damage, it involves things like enemy AI, it involves things like traversal. Like, there's a bunch of things that go into this engine. Now, I'm not even necessarily saying that they should take all of these elements and, you know, transfer them over into the next Legend of Zelda game. I think people, I don't know, you know, I think people might be a little bit tired of the whole breakable weapons thing. It doesn't really bother me all that much until it does bother me when I'm in a situation where I didn't want the weapon to break and it breaks, and then I'm just really pissed off. I feel like elements like that are what make Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom stand out and be different from traditional Legend of Zelda games. But sometimes people are going to want their comfort food. You know, you could do a crazy thing with Mario, but people always love, you know, a traditional 3D Mario game. There's a reason why people love Super Mario 64 and Galaxy and Galaxy 2 and Super Mario Odyssey, but there's a bit of a divide when it comes to Sunshine because of the fact that you got that stupid ass water pack. I can't stand that game. It's a gorgeous looking game, don't get me wrong, but I can't stand playing it because I hate the jetpack and I don't like the structure of the game. But there's people out there that like it, so to them I say, hey, you got your game, but give me my game. So I think this is very interesting. You know, a lot of people are kind of downplaying this, but I think there's some meat on this bone with this situation. I don't think that we're going to get Breath of the Wild 3. You know what I'm saying? I don't think the next Zelda game, and first off, I don't think the next Zelda game is going to be a full-on brand new game. I'm sure we're going to get some sort of remake or remaster in the meantime. Maybe even the fabled Wind Waker and Twilight Princess stuff, you know, that could be a nice stopgap that could hold people off for a year or two or something like that. But I feel like the next mainline Legend of Zelda game, I do think it's going to go back to a more traditional style. I think it will incorporate elements from the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom engine for sure, because yeah, it's an engine that they built, but you can also use that engine in other games. Like, I don't understand why everyone just thinks that engine can only be used for Zelda games, when if you think about it, I mean, you could do some really cool stuff like Mario or something like that, Star Fox, Metroid. Like, there's a lot of possibilities that you could utilize with that engine so that it's still getting some use out of it, because obviously this was a bigger budget project. This was a $70 Nintendo Switch game. It was the most costly developmental game in Nintendo's history, but they've already made their money back plus then, so you could go in a different direction, take a chance, do something a little bit more traditional, maybe incorporate elements in from it. So let me know in the comments section down below, how do you see the Legend of Zelda, I guess, essentially playing out for the future? Do you think that Zelda could be a more integral role and a playable role in a mainline Legend of Zelda game, which has not been the case in forever? And do you think that they are going to go with a bit of a more traditional style, or do you think it'll be another Breath of the Wild style, or will it be a hybrid of the two? Let me know what you think of all this in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share, hit that bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.